All right. Hi everyone, Tutor Sue here, and I've got myself a mic stand. So now I don't have to whisper in the mic anymore like a creep. Okay, so today I'm gonna walk you through the unsolved crimes of South Korea Iceberg. For those of you that don't know what an iceberg is, it basically is a tier list of things ranked from top to bottom, with the most well known items on the top, the surface, and the more unknown, obscure items on the bottom. However, in this iceberg, I tried to organize them by how puzzling they are and of depravity. So the further down we go, the more questions arise and the more wicked the crimes are. Of course, all of these are puzzling and nonetheless evil, and I'm in no position to judge which are viler than the other, but I figured that ranking them by obscurity wouldn't make sense since if you aren't Korean, these are all probably new to you. Now, I won't add any gore or provocative images to freak you out, so you won't have to worry about that. However, all of these cases are in fact evil, so viewer discretion is advised. I might get some details wrong here and there. If you know more about these cases that I am about to cover, or if you want to fix my errors, feel free to do so in the comments below, but in a kind manner, please. Also, keep in mind that I've left out chunks of minor details to give you a summary and overview of these 18 cases. So, without further ado, let's look into Tier 1. So, here we have Tier 1. The first one on the list is the cat saw case. Now, for those of you that don't know, Saw is an American horror gore film directed by James Wan, and it's a narrative revolving around this mystery of the jigsaw killer who tests his victims' will to live by putting them through deadly games. It's the movie with the famous quote, "I want to play a game." His victims have to cut their limbs off to survive and whatnot. Now, this user named Catsaw at DC Inside Gallery, which is a Korean community website, kind of like Reddit, posted pictures of his or her cat, Cha-Cha, on the cat community of the site, the cat subreddit, so to speak. The cat's lower jaw was completely gone. Supposedly, the criminal imitated the reverse bear trap from the movie Saw. The cat was bleeding substantially, but it was surely alive till that point. The criminal badmouthed cat lovers and wrote a threat on the post saying, "If you can convince me to let the cat live without cussing or criticizing me, I will do so." The criminal was trying hard to imitate the jigsaw killer from the movie Saw through her words and torture methods. Before the case spiraled out of control, the criminal supposedly deleted the post. However, many of the users of the website contacted the police, and this incident was televised as well. To cut the story short, the criminal was not caught. For one, back in the day, the website didn't require identification and didn't collect IP addresses like they do so now. So even before the cyber investigation team could jump on the case, so to say, the ID Catsaw and its traces have been completely deleted. Two, even if they do catch the criminal, if the criminal gets rid of all the evidences and just never admits, there is no way of punishing that person. So yeah, there was this maniac who wanted to imitate the jigsaw killer, not on a person, but a cat. Sad. The next case on Tier 1 is Hampyeong County poisoned bibimbap case. Now, in bibimbap, the word bibim means to mix and bap means rice. So it basically is white rice topped with various vegetables, a fried egg, and chili paste called gochujang mixed together. On January of 2012, 6 elderly people ate bibimbap at a senior citizen center. Each person brought their own toppings, the vegetables, to mix with the rice provided by the senior citizen center. After eating the bibimbap, however, the 6 elderly people all frothed and passed out. All of them were moved to the hospital. 5 of them recovered, but one elderly woman passed away after 2 days of the incident. Now, methamyl insecticide, which is quite poisonous even in low doses, were found in these people's blood. Therefore, the National Forensic Service of Korea looked into all of the bibimbap's ingredients, but the insecticide was only found in the white rice. If the insecticide was in a vegetable, one of the elders could have mistaken an insecticide with some sort of seasoning and put it in the vegetable. But since it was only found in the white rice, which was washed before being cooked, somebody must have put the insecticide in the rice on purpose. The problem with this case was that the Senior Citizen Center was a place that only a few specific people visit. There was no security camera around the place, and there was no fingerprint or any evidence left behind. All the residents had some sort of insecticides at their homes, since most of them were farmers. And since the only clue was the poisoned white rice, the case remains unsolved till this day. What a sick thing to do if it was done on purpose, deliberately. The final case in Tier 1 is the Boeun County poisoned bean sprouts with rice case. Very similar to the one that we've just talked about. 1 February of 2013, 4 elderly customers, 1 head chef, and the owner of a restaurant were having dinner together, so in total 6 people. During the meal, all 6 of them started to throw up and had difficulty breathing. They all fell into a state of coma and were transferred to the hospital thanks to the witness of this incident, the owner of a bar next to the restaurant. He called 911, which is technically 119 in Korea. Out of the 6 people, 1 customer didn't make it and passed away. Now, the National Forensic Service of Korea found methamyl insecticide, just like the case we looked at earlier, from the remains of the vomit. The only common food that the 6 people ate were bean sprouts, so it was concluded that the bean sprouts contained methamyl. At first glance, it seemed like the chef mistakenly put the insecticide on the bean sprouts to season it, because many restaurants used to use methamyl as rat poison or as pesticides. However, it was later revealed that the restaurant owner never bought or used methamyl. Also, the 1 customer that died had a tendency to season his food a lot. So, unlike the 5 people that survived, he put more bean sprouts on his rice and even more soy sauce on his rice. Out of the 5 people that survived, the first one who got discharged from the hospital put very little soy sauce on his rice. So instead of the bean sprouts, it is now concluded that the methamyl was in fact in the soy sauce. So, when was the methamyl put into the soy sauce? All the others who ate at the restaurant before the incident had no problems at all. So, it is estimated that it was right before the food was served. Now, by whom? Well, the customers were playing Ghost Stop, a Korean card game, before the food was served. It's a game where three people play, so any one of them could have done whatever he or she wanted without being noticed. And they took turns to play the game. So the person that was not playing a certain round would visit the bathroom. Now, to go to the bathroom in that restaurant, one had to go through the kitchen to reach it. Therefore, the police suspected that it was one of the customers who put methamyl in the soy sauce. Furthermore, the first person to be fully healed and discharged from the hospital, I'll name him A, only put very little soy sauce on his rice. So the police started to suspect the person A, thinking that since A knew that he put methamyl in the soy sauce, he put very little of it on his rice. However, other than that, there was nothing to be suspicious about him. He was not in bad terms with the owner of the restaurant. He, the person A, also said, I put little soy sauce on my rice because I had false teeth, artificial teeth. And I hate sesame seeds in the soy sauce getting stuck in my false teeth. So he was set free. Now, the bar owner next door was the next suspect, since he and the restaurant owner were in bad terms. About a month ago, before the incident, the two of them were playing Ghost Stop, the card game. The restaurant owner kept mocking and teasing the bar owner during the game about how bad he was at the game. So the bar owner got mad and flipped the table over and stomped away to his bar. But the bar owner claimed that the hatred died down since it happened a month ago and there were no other connections regarding him and the incident. So there you have it. Methamyl is now banned in Korea, so hopefully there's no more of this kind of accidents happening. Now we move on to tier 2, and this is where it gets viler. Okay. The first one on tier 2 is Doo-hyung Cho kidnapping case. 1 September of 1962 at Seoul, the capital city of Korea, Doo-hyung Cho, a 4-year-old boy, left his house at 9 o'clock to play. However, Doo-hyung Cho did not return. After 3 days, a letter arrived at Cho's house, and it said, "Give me money and I will return Doo-hyung Cho to you." Now, knowing that Doo-hyung was not simply lost, but surely kidnapped, the family contacted the police. In the 60s, this unheard of case of kidnapping a child for money, ransom, received great attention, and a nationwide investigation took place. Not only the police, but also the prosecuting attorneys and Park Chung-hee, then chairman of the Supreme Council, all issued public statements. Furthermore, the Ministry of Home Affairs, the Ministry of Education, the mass media, women's organizations, and all sorts of people tried to find Doo-hyung Cho, but they all failed. The police even promised leniency if the criminal would return the boy, but the criminal did not listen. The criminal sent 8 letters to the family in total. The first one told the family to bring 100,000 won, Korean money, to a certain place. The 6th letter told the family to bury the money under a telephone pole. and the final eighth letter told the family to give a certain person 200,000 won, and I will return Doo-hyung Cho to you. In the end, the criminal took the 200,000 won and ran away and did not return Doo-hyung Cho. It's been over 60 years since this happened, so it's most likely that the criminal and Doo-hyung Cho all passed away. Also, since most kidnappers kill and hide the children before requesting the ransom, because, it's not easy to keep a child next to you while you try to carry out your evil plans, it is now speculated that this criminal probably also killed Doo-hyung Cho. Sad. Okay, let's move on. The second one on tier 2 is the murder of a homeless girl in Suwon Station. Now, one morning of May 2007, a girl who appeared to be in her teens was found dead at Suwon High School. It may seem like she was a student of that school, but that was impossible since Suwon High School was an all-boys high school. The investigation was faced with many obstacles. First off, there was no way to identify who that girl was because, as an underage girl, her fingerprints weren't registered. Second, for 2 months, nobody claimed to be the girl's family member. The police, hence, prematurely concluded that the girl had to be a homeless girl. There was also a rumor among the homeless people at Suwon Station that this murdered girl supposedly stole money from the homeless people's leader. So this leader ordered his men to find her and beat her. And when they did, they beat her so much that she died. So they just threw her at a nearby high school. And this rumor got into the ears of the police, so they investigated the homeless people at Suwon Station and arrested 2 homeless men who were mentally challenged. 8 months after the incident, the police prosecuted 5 more juvenile delinquents. These teens had history of bullying and assaulting other students for money. They also stole cars, properties, and so forth. But during the trial, they denied all allegations and said they had nothing to do with this murdered girl. They claimed that the police and the prosecutor threatened them to falsely confess. Surprisingly, their claims turned out to be true. There was a video recording of the prosecutor's interrogation process, and during the process, the prosecutor tried to induce them to falsely confess to a crime that they didn't do by using difficult words and law clauses. He kept telling them things like, "Don't try to fool me, your lies won't work here," and whatnot. In other words, the prosecutor was trying to manipulate the case. Now, one of the delinquents was not even at Suwon on the day of the incident. So in the end, the delinquents were all proved innocent, and even the 2 mentally challenged homeless men testified that they were innocent. And yep, you guessed it, they were indeed innocent. Now, why was the prosecutor so keen on manipulating the case? Well, they investigated the case based on a rumor, arrested 2 innocent men, and persecuted 5 more innocent teens. If they did not, quote unquote, confess, it would have been a big damage on the prosecutor's name, his reputation. Furthermore, remember how the police prematurely identified the girl as a homeless girl at Suwon Station? She was not a homeless girl. About 2 months after the incident, The police aired the girl's face and her clothes on TV. The girl's parents saw the TV program and claimed to be her parents. Turns out she was a 15-year-old girl who did leave the house very often without notice. Her family was extremely poor. She was also mentally challenged and had a hard time making friends. So she relied on social media to make friends online. In 2011, the Korean TV program Unanswered Questions covered this case, and new information came to light. Days before the incident, the girl called her online friends to visit her house. When they did, they took everything that could be worth some money, like her mom's ring and earrings, and ran away from home. A person claimed to the TV show's reporters that she met 3 teenage runaways some years ago and that she heard them say that they supposedly beat another runaway teen and killed her by accident. Therefore, civic groups in Suwon strongly urged a reinvestigation of the case, but the statute of limitations expired due to the police's poor investigation. So this case will probably not be solved forever. Sad. Okay, let's move on to the final one. The final case on Tier 2 is the Galma-dong Villa murder case. 1 October of 2005, at a villa in Galma-dong, a 26-year-old woman was found murdered in her house. There was pancake mix flour all over the house, as if imitating a scene from the Korean movie Public Enemy, where the murderer conceals its murder traces by spraying flour at the scene of the crime. The criminal, however, left many clues at the crime scene, such as footprints and fingerprints, but the criminal is still on the loose and the case is still unsolved. When the dead body was found, the face was decomposed beyond recognition. As mentioned earlier, there was pancake mix flour all over the house. Not much on the dead body, but mostly on the floor, doorknob, light switch, and other places where the criminal thought could have left traces behind. There were more attempts by the criminal to cover up the traces of the crime. He put the blanket that was on the bed in the washing machine and did the laundry. The TV was also turned on, probably to conceal the sound of the crime. While the murderer did his best to erase his traces, clues did remain at the scene. He imitated the movie and sprayed the pancake mix flour, but according to the police, the traces aren't concealed that way. Furthermore, the flour bag had his fingerprint on it. His footprints remained on the floor, and there were blood traces of the murderer left on the bed mattress and on the victim's foot. So the police secured the murderer's DNA. Having secured the DNA, the police compared the DNA with ex-convicts. They also tried to look for grudge relationships, political relationships, or a love triangle. However, the woman was neither a person who could have caused resentment, nor was she in a love triangle. Alibi for those around her were perfectly clear too. Given that the murderer imitated the scene from the movie Public Enemy, the police also investigated people who borrowed that specific movie from video rental shops, but no trace of the criminal was revealed. Now, a taxi driver reported that he had a passenger who seemed to be in his mid-20s. He was trembling throughout the ride, and he kept sighing with both his hands on his face. When he got off the taxi, he left the ride fare on the armrest, and the money had blood stains on it. The taxi driver also said that the passenger seat had some white powder on it. The police therefore investigated the area where the passenger supposedly got off, but nothing came to light. This happened in 2005, so it's been about 18, 19 years. The police are quite positive that the murder will someday be revealed because they have the DNA and whatnot, but we just don't know when. Yeah. Now we move on to tier 3, and it gets more bizarre from here on out. Let's go. The first case on this tier is the Gyeyang-gu playground murder case. On a hot August day of year 2000, a 7-year-old girl was playing with her friends at the playground. Just then, a random man came up to the children and asked, "Which way is it to Hyundai department store?" So this girl, out of a kind heart, led the man toward the department store. When they started walking, a few steps away from the playground, the man suddenly took a knife out, stabbed the girl in the stomach, and ran away. The girl's friends, witnessing all this, were shocked and tried to alert nearby adults. The girl, after being stabbed, staggered her way toward the company where her mom worked. When she walked for about 50 meters, civilians witnessed her and called the police and the ambulance. However, on the way to the hospital, she died of excessive bleeding because the stab was just too deep. An innocent girl was stabbed for no obvious reason, so it was a huge shock in Korea. However, there was no security camera around that area, so it was impossible to trace the murderer. A montage of the suspect was made based on the statements of the girl's friends, who were the only witnesses of the crime. The montage was aired on TV, and the police investigated all sorts of drug addicts, mentally challenged people, and citizens around the scene, but failed to catch the culprit. Now, a month before this incident, there was a similar case about a kilometer away from the scene. A 4-year-old girl was watering flowers with her mom on a flower bed outside the apartment. The mother went up to her house on the 5th floor, which took only about 10 minutes. When the mother returned, she witnessed her young daughter on the ground, dying, barely able to murmur her pain, with a total of 3 stabs in her back and the flank. There was no security camera or witnesses. It even rained on that day, so all the traces were washed away. In conclusion, it does seem like it's the same criminal that did these crimes, since they both happened so close to each other using the same killing method. There was also a rumor that there used to be a man that seemed to be mentally challenged who used to visit the arcade near the area frequently. However, after these incidents, he was seen no more at the arcade. Suspicious. Now we move on to case number 2 on tier 3, the case of an abandoned skull at Uljin County. On January of 2015, a resident at Uljin County went up a nearby mountain to collect herbs. He couldn't find any and decided to climb down the mountain. On the way, however, he noticed something that looked like a shin bone in between the fallen leaves and the dry grass. At first, he thought it was some animal's shin bone, but when he went closer, there were remains of some flesh on the bone. Startled, the man reported to the police, and the police started to scour the mountain. Surprisingly, parts of a human skeleton, including arms and pelvis, began to appear throughout the mountain. At first, the police thought it was some wild animal's doings because there were many cases where a wild animal would dig up a grave and scatter what's inside all around the mountains. However, about 500 meters away from where the first bone was found, somebody had purposely buried a human's ribs and a skull. The police sent the bones to the National Forensic Service of Korea, and the results were jaw-dropping. All the scattered bones that were found were the bones of one person, and they were all artificially cut and abandoned by someone. In other words, it was a dismemberment murder case. It was impossible to completely identify whose bones they were because there was no DNA or fingerprints or whatnot on the bones. The police could only identify this much. First, the victim is a woman in her 40s. Two, her blood type is A. Three, she's about 161 centimeters tall. Four, she died about a year ago. And five, her bones were sawed off unnaturally. And finally, six, there was a US made prosthesis inserted near the skull, which is something that is used for a nose plastic surgery. The mountain where the bones were found is quite far from the nearest town, so it was a place where not many people would go. Maybe only some fishermen and people who would visit the graves sometimes go there. Therefore, the profilers concluded that the murderer must know the place very well to have hidden the bones at a place where only a few people visit from time to time. Looking at all the unnatural dismember marks, the victim tried his best to prevent the bones from revealing the victim's identity. So the profilers also suspected that the victim must have been very close to the criminal because the criminal must have thought if the victim's identity is revealed, they will be able to find who I am. Yeah, the police ran a complete enumeration of the area, investigating all the single households, missing adults, and whatnot, but they couldn't identify the victim. The police also found Gore-Tex prosthesis from the skull, so they asked all the plastic surgeons of the area, looked into the profiles of the people who received the plastic surgeries, but still couldn't identify who the victim was. And this is still an unsolved mystery. The final one we will look into is the case of death from a fall at Anyang's H studio apartment. On May of 2012, a security footage leaked on the internet went viral, which showed a woman or something that looked like it fall from the apartment. A janitor first noticed what seemed to be a dead woman and notified the management office staffs. The staff members came to the scene, and one of them casually took a photo of it. Later, one of them appeared with a big cloth and a burlap bag. He covered the supposed dead body and put it in the burlap bag. The bag was left unattended for quite a while. Another staff appeared with a cart, put the burlap bag on it, and threw it off at the dump in the basement floor. The whole security footage is a mystery. First off, there was a debate whether if it was a real human or some real doll that fell from the high floors. The people that believed it was a doll, not a human, claimed that the backbone bending more than 80 degrees during the fall was impossible to be a human's. Also, the management staffs were all looking calm and composed. If it was a real dead human body, it is impossible to stay that calm. So they claimed that someone who couldn't care to throw away the real doll at the dumps just threw it out the window to get rid of it. Now, on the other hand, the people claiming that it was a real human said that what kind of real doll has blood in it? There indeed were a few blood stains on the ground visible near the fall, but not that much. But if that indeed was a real person, it's hard to explain the actions of the management staffs. They were all way too calm and composed, and it was broad daylight, yet nobody called the police. Only after the video got viral, the police started the investigation. They told the staff member who took the picture to show it to them, but he claimed that he lost his cell phone. Not only that, he claimed that the bloodstains were pig's blood that were in the doll. Of course, it was already too late to verify the truth. The police also searched for witnesses around the area, but nobody came forth. The video itself was the only footage available, so they had no choice but to close the case. There's a hypothesis that while it was a real human, the staff members were all too shocked that they all fell into a state of denial and fell into hypnosis, saying that this is a doll, this is a doll. So even after witnessing the blood, they all went, this is pig's blood, this is pig's blood. That would explain the actions of the staff who took the picture. He might have been like, oh, somebody threw a real doll out the window, snap. Interesting. I should take a picture and tell my friends, haha. But later, getting out of the hypnosis state, recognizes that it indeed was a real human and throws his phone away. The mystery does not end here though. A family reported to the police that one of its family members, a woman in her early 30s, went missing in action. The shocking thing is, the date of disappearance matched the security footage's date, and the place that the woman was last seen was the very same apartment of that footage. But since the police arrived days after the incident to the scene, there was no way of knowing if the fallen body was indeed this missing person. There is a high probability that these two cases are linked, but it remains unsolved till this day. Yep, sad. Now we move on to tier 4. The first one on this tier is the missing teenage girl at Cheongju City. 1 January of 2014, a Korean girl who was in year 12 or senior year of high school went out of her house at noon to meet her friend. However, a day had passed and she did not return home. So the family contacted the police. The police started the investigation right away. They first tracked down her cell phone. For some reason, the phone was in a taxi and the girl had lost her phone before the day of the incident. So the phone was registered as a lost phone and was formatted clean and it could not be restored. So the police investigated places that she could have gone to. She had been staying in a very small studio apartment for about 4 months to get a job near the area. So on the weekdays, she would stay there, the small studio apartment, and on the weekends, she would come back home to her family's house, etc. Anyways, on the day of the incident, the small studio apartment's security footage showed her going into it. So she lied to her family that she was going to meet her friend. She actually went to that studio apartment. The police contacted her friends for investigation, and the friends told the police that there was this man in his late 40s living in the same small studio apartment. That man quite frequently hit on her, and he would come to her room at night to download movies for her. She also entrusted her cat to this man. So the police thought this man must be related to this case. The owner of this small studio apartment, the whole building, also claimed that this man's name was Han, and he lived in this studio apartment for quite some time. His rent was about 6 months overdue, but the owner showed empathy for him and let him live there and work as the building's janitor. But he left the building early morning the day after the girl's missing incident and never returned. So the police started to track this man down. About half a month later, he was found dead at a construction site. He had hung himself. There was no will or a suicide note nearby, but only his phone. The man had texted the girl on the day of the incident, which read, "You said you were coming. Why aren't you?" And he, for some reason, called the girl's phone the day after the incident. So there is a slight chance that he might not have been the murderer, but people rightfully suspect that he called her on purpose to make an alibi. There are many bizarre things to this case. First off, she is still not found till this day. And second, the man on the day of his suicide went to sell his old car, but the money was transferred not to his bank account, but to the missing girl's bank account. And three, it was very uncommon for a year 12 student or a high school senior to live in a small studio apartment alone for 4 months to look for a job. Weird. Okay. The next one on the list is the murder case of Bugok-dong, Ulsan. One August day of 2010, a 53-year-old woman who just got off work as a cook at a bar in Ulsan in the early hours suddenly went missing. When she got on a taxi, she contacted her family that she was on her way home, but that was the last of her voice and she was never to return. At 4:20 a.m., the family contacted the police and the police started the investigation right away. On the night of the day she went missing, about 1,000,000 won, approximately $1,000, was taken out from the woman's debit card at two different locations. The police went to the second location, a convenience store, and caught a young man red-handed. The young man was only 18 years old. The police grabbed him and took him to the station, only to find out that he was not the criminal. The young man claimed that a middle-aged man came up to him, gave him the card and 30,000 won in cash, which is about $30, and told him to withdraw the cash with the card for him. So this middle-aged man must be the criminal, but it wasn't easy tracking him down. Also, when the young man was getting pushed to the police car at the convenience store, he told the police that on the ground there is the cigarette butt that this middle-aged man threw away, so they should take it as proof. However, the police ignored him. If they hadn't ignored him, they could have gotten the criminal's DNA from the cigarette bud. But this didn't happen, and it remains unsolved. 8 months later, a man reported to the police that he had found a corpse, a full skeleton, at a forest near Bugok-dong. The forensics team looked into it, and it was the remains of the woman that disappeared 8 months earlier. There were only bones remaining, so there was no way of telling how the woman was murdered. The mysterious thing about this case is that there are 3 people who had seen this middle-aged man's face. The 18-year-old young man was one of them. This criminal, after receiving some of the money from the young man before he got caught, went straight to a massage parlor. The owner of the massage parlor rejected him because he looked seriously drunk. So this owner of the parlor was one of the witnesses as well. The criminal, after getting rejected from the massage parlor, took a taxi. The taxi's dash cam had video footage of the criminal. However, the video quality was terrible, so it only showed the physical build of the criminal. So this taxi driver is the 3rd person who saw this criminal's face. So a clear montage was made of the criminal based on the testimonies of these witnesses, yet he is still on the loose. The last case on Tier 4 is the torso murder case at Cheonan City. 1 January of 2006, a 43-year-old woman who had an interest in collecting junk and antiques went to a garbage dump in the morning to find junk that was worth selling. She found a garbage bag wrapped in old clothes. Now, old clothes were sold at about 600 won per kilogram, or about 60 cents per kilogram, so she decided to take it. However, the old clothes were somehow too heavy to carry. She thought it could have contained wet clothes, like drenched clothes, so she unfolded the clothes. Inside, there were black plastic bags, and inside the plastic bags were, again, old clothes. And inside those old clothes were parts of a human body. The full body parts, the limbs, were there, cut clean, except for the body and arms. The junk collector contacted the police, and they arrived to the garbage dump. The police investigated the area, but couldn't find the body and arms. What were found, the remains, the others, were sent to the forensics team, and here are the results. First, the dead was a middle-aged woman, a woman in her late 50s. Second, she was about 150 to 155 centimeters tall. Third, she had a wide forehead and had no double eyelids. Fourth, she had a protruding mouth. Fifth, she had a mole in between her eyebrows. Sixth, she had a chubby build. Seventh, her front teeth had a V-shaped furrow, like that, V-shaped furrow. And eighth, she was likely choked to death. Ninth, she was dead for about a day or two. And lastly, 10th, her body parts were cut off extremely clean. The forensic doctors therefore speculated that the criminal must have some experience with orthopedic surgeries or butchering. So the police investigated nearby butcher shops, slaughterhouses, and whatnot, but couldn't find any concrete evidence. The dead woman's front teeth also had this V-shaped furrow, a V-shaped hole, so to speak. That was usually a characteristic of immigrants from China or Vietnam, for they enjoy sunflower seeds as snack. To eat sunflower seeds, they have to uncover the shell by using their front teeth. And if done a million times, that could leave this V-shaped furrow on the front teeth. That is probably why the dead woman couldn't be identified, because there was a high chance that the victim was a foreigner. The montage of her face was made solely relying on the bones that were recovered. While it was posted everywhere and also aired on TV, nobody claimed to know this person. 7 long months later, about 100 kilometers away from the dumps where the bones were found, a black plastic bag was found in another dumps, and this time it contained the torso and arm bones. The forensic team did their work and concluded that the owner of the torso and the arms died about half a year to a year ago. So the police thought they had found a silver lining and thought that the torso and the arms belonged to the woman that we were talking about earlier. However, the DNA did not match, and it was concluded that they belonged to two completely different persons. The torso and the arms belonged to another woman who was killed by her husband because he had this delusional jealousy toward his wife. That's a whole other case, which is thankfully solved. The husband spent 15 years in prison, and he was released September of last year. So anyways, back to the initial case. Everything is still a mystery. Nobody knows who she is, and it will probably remain concealed like that forever. This incident showed how vulnerable poor foreign workers can be in Korea. Now we move on to tier 5. Gets either viler or more puzzling. Here we go. The first one on tier 5 is the sulfuric acid terror case of Daegu City. This case is really screwed up. To give you a heads up, the too long didn't read TLDR version of it is that a mysterious man went up to a 7-year-old boy and sprayed sulfuric acid on the boy's face and ran away. Yep. On May of 1919, about 11 a.m., a 7-year-old boy was going to a piano hagwon. Now, hagwons in Korea are educational institutes. In an English hagwon, you learn English. In a cooking hagwon, you learn how to cook, etc. Anyways, on his way to a piano hagwon, a mysterious man appeared and he had a black plastic bag on his hand. This man poured what was in the bag on the boy, and as I've mentioned, the bag contained sulfuric acid. So this boy got third-degree burns not only on his face, but also to his body. He instantly went blind, and after 49 days of brutal agony at a hospital bed, passed away due to blood poisoning. This happened only in 10 minutes after the boy walked out of his house. This mysterious man grabbed this boy's hair from the back, pulled it, and poured the sulfuric acid on his face. The acid went through the boy's eyes, nose, and mouth, and it burned his esophagus. The boy screamed in pain, and the mother heard it and went out, only to witness the boy crawling toward her with his skin and clothes burning. The only witness to this horrible crime was a deaf man, and he couldn't testify anything. This story is so sad because, first off, it was a random evil doing in broad daylight. Second, the boy had to suffer so much for 50 days. And thirdly, the boy's family wrote a journal for the 49 days they were with the boy at the hospital. And if you read it, you cannot not cry. The entries are like, Daddy will catch this bad person and he will be punished. Don't worry, my boy, you can get through this. Mom whispered to the boy, hey, it's okay, go ahead first. Mommy and Daddy and your elder brother will be with you soon enough. And in the other world, don't be sad, we will be there soon with you. Goodbye, goodbye. And also many other accounts of how the boy cried so much in pain during those final days, and how he asked innocent questions like, after I get healed, can I get that new toy that I wanted? And it contained all the processes in the hospital and the funeral as well. According to many detectives, criminal experts, and whatnot, they say that this case could have been solved if the police were more competent. The thing is, the police didn't do their best in investigating the people around the area, disregarding all testimony of the boy's friend just because his intelligence was a bit low, and didn't seriously consider looking deep into a suspect whose alibis and testimonies were full of lies just because there was no concrete proof. Before this case in Korea, the statute of limitations, the prescriptive period for murder, was 15 years. So if someone commits a murder and after 15 years, even if the murderer gets caught, he can't be punished. But now, in Korea, there is no prescriptive period regarding murder cases. There is no statute of limitations regarding murder cases. Yeah. And that is because of this sad incident. So heartbreaking. Let's move on. The next one on the list is the death of a 3-year-old girl at Gumi City. Now, this case is an absolute enigma, and it would take more than an hour to unveil the details. So I'll just give you a quick rundown, and I'll explain the details in a separate video later on. So a 3-year-old girl was found dead at an empty apartment. So her mother, the dead girl's mother, I'll call her A, was arrested, but it turns out A was not the biological mother. The real biological mother was A's mother. I'll call her B. And the dead girl's father was not B's husband, nor B's 2 boyfriends, but some man that isn't identified yet. And A actually also gave birth to a girl, but she is missing. So the dead girl thought A was her mother, but she actually is A's half-sister. Confusing, right? I'll maybe make a video of this crazy drama later on. The final case on Tier 5 is the plastic bag murder case at Cheongju City. One cold February evening, a man went out for a walk with his dog. For some reason that day, the dog kept turning its head frequently as if it were looking for something. So the man let the dog go its own way and followed it toward the woods. In the woods, he found a dead woman with a black plastic bag on her face. He reported to the police right away. The police started the investigation and identified the corpse as a 57-year-old woman who worked as a night shift cleaning lady at a supermarket nearby. This woman was also reported missing 11 days prior to this discovery. Now, if a corpse is left untouched for about 11 days, it decomposes beyond recognition. But since it was a cold winter season, the corpse was left quite intact. There were no bloodstains, and the only visible wound was on her left hand, nibbled away by a rat. However, on her body were body fluid of a man, so she probably was raped and murdered. The investigation was difficult because there was no sign of resistance to the rape at all. Usually, in a rape plus murder case, the woman's fingernails contain flesh or blood of the rapist. But sometimes they are unable to resist at all because of fear. The rapist could have had a knife on her neck while he did the act. However, there were no signs of assault, use of a weapon, or even strangulation. In other words, even before she was murdered, she was at a state of being unable to resist, and the criminal left her to die slowly by suffocating on a black plastic bag. The victim used to go to work to a big supermarket at 10 p.m. and would get off at 5 a.m. She usually took the first bus to go home. On the day she was murdered, the public bus didn't come on time. A security footage, very low quality, showed a car pull up in front of her. A man in his 50s got off the car, talked to the woman for about 10 seconds or so, and they got on his car together. The car was never to be seen again, though. Speculating based on these evidences, the criminal and the victim most likely knew each other. The man could have said, "Hey, I'll give you a ride home," and so they got on the car together. So the police investigated all the men in the supermarket and those who knew the woman, but their DNA didn't match the criminal's DNA left on her body. The license plate number couldn't be seen in the security footage, but the car model was identified. So the police investigated 17,000 owners of that specific car model, but none of their DNA matched with the criminal's DNA. The profilers say that the criminal could have been a psychopath because the woman was left to die very slowly, suffocating on a loosely tightened plastic bag only. They suspect that the criminal must have enjoyed looking at the woman in terror, suffer, and die slowly. It's such a mystery that it seems like there is all the footage needed to find the criminal, but the police just can't seem to crack the case. Weird. And okay. Now we finally move on to tier 6. Usually in an iceberg video, the things at the very bottom are the obscure, very little known items. However, in this video, they are the most well-known ones for Koreans, but they are considered the 3 biggest unsolved mysteries of Korea. Just for your information, one of these cases are solved. So, strictly speaking, one of them is a recently solved case. Let's go. The first case on tier 6 is the Frog Boys case. Now, this one was a huge nationwide case in Korea, so if you are one of those mystery geeks, you might have heard about it. On March 26, 1991, 5 boys, unrelated but all attending the same school, aged between 9 to 13, disappeared after searching for salamander eggs in the western outskirts of Daegu on a public holiday. It started out as 6 boys at first, but one of them decided to go back home just before entering the mountains, remembering how his mom told him not to go that far because it's dangerous, obviously. He literally had made the best decision of his life. Anyways, The five boys met an elder brother of one of its members at the entrance of the mountain. That was the last family member to have seen them before they vanished. They were also seen by some schoolmates, some residents near the area, and off they went into the deep mountains. One boy, who was also at the mountains with another group of friends, testified that he heard two sharp and urgent screams at about 10 seconds intervals deeper into the mountains. That was about 11:30 a.m., and in that time, two of the victims' mothers had this ominous, foreboding senses and went out to find the boys. They heard that these boys went to the mountains to find salamander eggs, so they just returned home and thought, I'll punish them for going too far away from home when they come back. The boys never returned, however, so at 6 p.m., the parents of the five boys went to search for them in the mountains. After 2 hours of searching, they reported to the police that their kids were missing. So with the police, they tried to look for them until 3 a.m. However, they were nowhere to be seen. The police first assumed that these boys ran away from home. That was ridiculous because although these five boys' families were not rich, they were in good terms, and the youngest boy of the group was only 9 years old. What kind of a child in his right mind would decide to run away out of the blue? Because of this decision, the investigation was delayed. It wasn't a kidnapping case, too, because there was no threat letters asking them for a ransom or whatnot. When this case was publicized nationally, the president back then ordered the police and soldiers to thoroughly scope around not only the specific mountain, but everywhere in Korea. A total of 300,000 people were involved in the search for the missing kids. The police scoured the mountains 48 times, inspected passing by cars 43 times, searched over 1,000 welfare and religious facilities, more than 11,000 homes, investigated 1,800 elementary school graduates and 19,000 workers nearby, but couldn't find a single clue. The police also tried getting all the water out of a reservoir, scoured uninhabited islands, and so forth. The parents went all over the nation with trucks passing out flyers and posters. Many companies donated money to help find the kids and placed the boys' pictures on their products. The five families gave their everything to look for the boys, but nothing unveiled. However, 11 years and 6 months after the incident, which is on the 26th September of 2002, a man went to the very mountain that the kids went and found their remains at the foot of that mountain, like near the entrance of the mountain. You see, the police thought that if the boys were indeed buried, they must have been deep in the mountains. That's why the foot of the mountains were overlooked. Now, when the bones were found, the police made a huge mistake here. They should have called for a forensics investigation team, but instead, they used pickaxes to dig up the ground, damaging the site and therefore unable to preserve the area. So, accurate autopsy or an on site inspection was impossible. They also prematurely reported, without any basis, that, there seems to be little trace of murder just by looking at them, and they died of hypothermia, by the cold weather. Because they damaged the scene so severely, only one of the boys' bones could be looked into. The forensic team concluded that the boys were either hit by a blunt instrument or stabbed to death. A pair of pruning shears is the most likely used weapon, as an experiment showed that the way the skull broke into pieces after being hit by a pair of shears resembled how the retrieved skull looked like. So there are many speculations to this case. Some say it could have been some thugs doing, maybe a spy from North Korea, a psychopath serial killer, the parents, the teachers, the country itself, and so forth. In 2020, a Singaporean broadcasting channel called CAN made a documentary of this case. It's on YouTube. It's very detailed, it's well made, and has interviews of the victims' parents. I recommend watching it if you are interested. As I've mentioned, it's on YouTube. Yeah. The next case at the last tier of this iceberg is the kidnapping and murder of Lee Hyung-ho. There is a Korean movie named Voice of a Murderer based on this true story, so if you would like, you could check that movie out. Okay. On the evening of 29th of January 1991, Lee Hyung-ho was last seen playing on a swing at a playground of an apartment in Seoul. Later that very night, a man, most likely in his 30s, called Hyung-ho's parents and requested a ransom of 70 million won. Now, 70 million won would slightly be less than 3 billion won in today's day and age, which would roughly be about under 200,000 US dollars. The criminal ordered the parents to stand by 70 million won plus a car with a car phone built into it. The criminal's threats lasted for 44 days and he called the parents about 60 times. The criminal was quite meticulous and knew what he was doing. After the first call by the criminal, he called the house again, pretending to be a cop. He said, "This is a police officer at Seocho Station. Please put the detective on the phone." A detective from Gangnam Police Station was indeed at the house, but the detective felt something was off and induced the mom to say, what kind of detective would come to someone's house? So the criminal just hung up. 2 days later, the criminal told the kidnapped boy's father to put the money in his car. The father, on the receiving end of the car phone, was ordered to go to many different locations in Seoul. Finally, the criminal told the father to park his car at the second parking lot of Gimpo Airport, leave the car keys in the car, take bus number 600 and go back home. The father did as he was told. However, the criminal did not go to the car. Instead, he later called that very night and said, "Why didn't you keep your promise? Somebody was at the back seat of the car." Well, the detective from Gangnam Police Station did stay hidden in the car, but he was at the trunk, not the back seat. So either the criminal somehow saw the detective getting into the trunk, or he could have just called a bluff. Later, the criminal told the father to get back to the car and receive the car phone. He did as he was told, and the criminal told him to park the car in front of the Daehan Theater and go to a cafe across it. The cafe was closed though, so the criminal told the father to instead go to a chicken restaurant that was open. The father did as he was told. However, this time, the criminal called the parents' house and told the mother, "Somebody is strolling around the area. I told you not to call the police. Are you gonna keep lying to me?" Well, the thing was that there just happened to be two petty thieves loitering about the area who had happened to find a car open with the money in it. So these two petty thieves tried to steal the money from the car. The police arrested them on the spot, thinking that they were related to the kidnapper. So it is most likely that the kidnappers saw this incident happening. So the criminal thought receiving the money in person would be too dangerous. He decides to get the money transferred to his bank account. On the 4th of February, he ordered the mother to drive the car, go to this certain bus stop, and told her that a memo would be stuck underneath the garbage bin on the bus stop. The memo redirected her to go to another place and another place, and in the final memo, there were two bank accounts written on it. And the criminal wrote, put 20 million won in account A and 40 million won in account B. After consulting the police, the parents transferred 20 million won only. Cops were stationed at the computation center of the bank, tracking down all the money transfers and whatnot. However, for some reason, the criminal called the parents on the night of the 13th of February and said, "You don't love your child, do you? Do you want him dead? Head out to the 88 expressway and you will reach the Seoul Bridge. Below it there is a metal box and a memo is pressed down with a stone. This will be your final chance to save the child." The memo redirected the parents to many different places, and on the final memo, it said, "Put the money on a metal box under the Yanghwa Bridge." The parents went to the metal box and put an envelope into the metal box, which contained counterfeit money, fake money. It was the final chance for the police nearby to catch the criminal. However, the location of the metal box got mixed up somehow while they were communicating through walkie-talkies. While the kidnapper took the envelope from the metal box, the police were running about in confusion in the wrong places. That night, the kidnapper called the parents and said, "There were fake money inside the envelope. I'll take that as you don't want Hyung-ho back. Well, at least thanks for not calling the cops." He hung up and never called again. On February 19th, the criminal went to a bank with his bank book to retrieve the 20 million won. The banker received the bank book and ran it on computer. Just then, a phrase "accidental report" appeared on the screen. The banker was confused and baffled, and he started to suspect the person as the criminal. The criminal thought he was found out by the police, so he snatched the bank book from the banker and ran away. If the banker was a bit calmer and handled the situation better, the criminal could have been caught. Furthermore, the bank didn't have security cameras installed, so there was no way to catch the kidnapper. On March 13, at a drainway next to a tunnel at Jamsil, a boy's corpse was found. The eyes, nose, and mouth were taped, and the hands and feet were tied. The corpse was indeed Hyung-ho's, and the forensics team said he probably died slowly of suffocation due to the tapings on his nose and mouth. He was also most likely hit on the head 3 times with a blunt object. His stomach had contained food that he ate in his friend's house on the day he was kidnapped, so he most likely died on the day he was kidnapped. In other words, Hyung-ho was killed almost instantaneously by the kidnapper, so it was impossible to return him safe and sound in the first place. So for 44 days, the criminal was playing this sick trick on the parents. There are so many theories as to who the criminal is. Some say the criminal is not one, but at least 3 people. Some say it's Hyung-ho's cousin, a resident at the apartment, Hyung-ho's parents' friends, and whatnot. On YouTube, you can see the criminal's montage, and you can listen to the actual phone calls that he made to Hyung-ho's parents. Creepy, screwed up, and sad. Yeah. Now the last case on the list, which used to be unsolved until 2019, is the Hwaseong City serial murders. The serial killer's name is Lee Chun-jae, and in his lifetime, he had killed 14 people, 10 in Hwaseong from 1986 to 1991. The first one was on September 19th, 1986. A 72-year-old grandma was found dead at a pasture field. She was strangled to death, and her bottoms, including her underwear, were taken off. She wasn't raped though, so I guess Lee Chun-jae, the murderer, kind of practiced his sick plans on her. The second one happened about a month later. On the 20th of October 1986, a 26-year-old lady was raped and murdered. She was found 3 days later in a farm waterway by the farm owner. The lady was naked, was stabbed several times on the chest and back, and her neck was wrapped around with her stockings. The cause of death was through strangling. The criminal's semen, cigarette butt, and hair were found, but they couldn't track down the criminal. The third happened on the 12th of December 1986. A 25-year-old lady was raped and murdered. Her corpse was found 4 months later. Lee Chun-jae, the criminal, dragged the lady to a rice field, stripped her off, put her girdle, her underwear, in her mouth as a muzzle, raped her, strangled her with her own stockings, and hid the corpse under burlap bags filled with sand. The corpse was, of course, decomposed beyond recognition, but one of her belongings was a wooden stamp with her name engraved in it, so the police could identify the woman. The fourth happened on 14th of December 1986. A 22-year-old lady was raped and murdered. This happened only 2 days after the last incident. She was found a week after the date of the murder under a blanket of bunch of sesame leaves. Her hands were tied on her back with her blouse, and the girdle was put on her head. She was hit with an umbrella and had multiple indications of a sexual assault. She too died by being strangled with her own stockings. The fifth happened on the 10th of January 1987. An 18-year-old girl was raped and murdered. Her body was found the day after the incident in a bundle of rice. Her hands were tied with her underwear, but she had her clothes on, unlike other cases. She was still sexually assaulted though, so this is the fifth sexual assault plus murder that Lee Chun-jae did. And since it all happened within 2 kilometers range and had similar circumstances, like the method of killing, the police was now 100% sure that a serial killer was on the loose. Yeah, only after the fifth one they realized it. The sixth happened on the 2nd of May, 1987. A 29-year-old lady was raped and murdered. On a rainy night, she went out to the bus station with an umbrella to meet her husband halfway because he didn't take an umbrella with him. However, the husband couldn't see the wife at the bus stop nor at the house, and the police later on could only find one of her sandals at the bus stop. About a week later, some students on the way back home from school found the corpse. It was hidden inside a pile of wood next to a grave. The corpse had its tops off, her hands were tied at the back, and her neck was wrapped with her blouse and underwear. She too was raped and strangled to death. The seventh happened more than a year later, on the 7th of September 1988. A 54-year-old woman was raped and murdered. She was found drenched in blood in the nearby woods. Her hands were tied with her blouse, her mouth was stuffed with her socks and handkerchief, and her skirt seemed to be taken off and put back on. Of course, there were signs of sexual assault. What's more gruesome was that just like the fourth murder that Lee Chun-jae did, he hit her with an umbrella, and this time he also put 7 pieces of peach inside her private area. Yeah. The 8th murder happened on the 16th of September 1988. A 13-year-old girl was done the same to her like the previous victims at her own house. This incident has its own long story to it because another man was falsely accused and spent 20 years in prison. I'll break it down for you though. The too long didn't read of it is Lee Chun-jae climbed over the girl's house's fence, discreetly broke into the house, went into this girl's room, sexually assaulted her, strangled her to death, covered her up, and ran away. The mother found her dead daughter in her room the next day. You see, the reason another man was falsely accused and spent 20 years in prison was that Lee Chun-jae's hair was found on the girl's room. The hair went through an analysis and it contained 300 times more titanium than an average person. So the police arrested a 22-year-old man working at a cultivator repair center, tortured him, and forced him to, quote-unquote, confess that he was the murderer. Now that we know the real criminal, this falsely accused man is out of prison living his life, but his 20 years of cell life can never be compensated. The 9th happened on the 15th of November 1990 to a 14-year-old girl. She was on a hill, covered in her school uniform. Her hands and feet were tied with her stockings, and her underwear was stuffed in her mouth. The forensics result is messed up. Lee Chun-jae sexually assaulted the girl, took out an office knife from the girl's pencil case and stabbed the girl's chest more than 20 times, and finally killed her by strangling her with her blouse and stockings. And he also put her spoon, fork, pens inside her. Yeah, very disturbing. The final 10th one, a 69-year-old woman was raped and murdered on the 3rd of April 1991. Her bottoms were all taken off, her stockings were wrapped around her neck, and her socks were inserted in her... Yeah. This time the victim was not tied like the other victims. Until 2019, all of this was a huge mystery. The crime methods were very similar. The victims having their hands tied up, having their underwear put on their heads and whatnot. All of these cases happened relatively close to each other. The victims were all about 165 centimeters tall and thin. This man left so many clues behind, but the technology, the science just wasn't enough back then. Now, after the 7th assault and murder, Lee Chun-jae was spotted taking a bus back home towards Suwon station, so a montage was made based on the testimonies of the bus driver and the bus attendant. Yeah, there was a bus attendant a long time ago. If you see the montage and the real criminal's face, you can definitely see the similarities. The sad thing about this serial killings is that the police didn't admit that a serial murder was going on up until the 5th one. Only after the 5th one happened, the police finally admitted that there was a serial killer on the loose. You see, the country was getting ready for the 1988 Olympics, and they didn't want this dark side to be revealed globally. So the police prematurely damaged the crime scenes, burned crucial evidences and whatnot to cover up and hush these things from going viral, so to speak. But as the public was raging and all of the media spotlighted these incidents, the government started to pressure the police to solve this case as fast as possible. More than 2 million police were involved yearly to this case, and about 21,000 innocent suspects were looked into. The investigations were all very inefficient, and the police relied on rumors and asking residents about useless information. The case did help Korea establish its own scientific investigations teams and forensics and so forth, though. Now, how was Lee Chun-jae, the real criminal behind this sick events, caught? You see, other than the 10 murders that he committed in Hwaseong between 1986 to 1991, he had killed 4 more people. In 1996, 2 years after killing his wife's younger sister, he was finally caught and received a life sentence. Up until 2019, the police found him guilty of only 1 murder and multiple sexual assaults. But in 2019, the police decided to run a DNA check on all prisoners. Surprisingly, the DNA retrieved from the 9th murder of Hwaseong matched the DNA of Lee Chun-jae's. So the forensics team looked into the DNA retrieved from the 5th, 7th, 3rd, and 4th murders in that particular order, and they all matched Lee Chun-jae's DNA. Lee Chun-jae was interrogated, but he kept denying the charges. On the 8th interrogation, on the 1st of October 2019, he had finally confessed. In total, other than the 10 serial murders at Hwaseong, he had committed a total of 14 murders and 30 rapes / attempted rapes. His DNA was found on the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 7th, and 9th murders of the Hwaseong serial killings, and for the others, he could explain in detail how he committed his evil doings, and could also draw in detail of how the crime scenes looked like. He will of course spend the remaining of his life in prison, but the aftermath and agony caused to the victims and their families will never be healed. Remember how I said that 21,000 people were wrongfully suspected by the police and investigated? Out of the 21,000, 41 people went through a tremendously rough time. Most of them were beaten, tortured, waterboarded, and so much more. Some of them couldn't endure the torture and torments, so they made false confessions. Therefore, some of them spent time in prison, developed mental disorders, and some of them even committed suicide. If you would like to know further details about this, I'd recommend watching documentaries about this guy. It's all over on YouTube. Phew, that was a long journey, way longer than I expected it to be. Bear in mind that I tried to keep them in a nutshell, so many details were omitted. Yeah. If the video was of any interest to you, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment about what you would like to see next. Thank you all so much for watching, and see you next time. I was Tutor Sue. Bye bye.